we will have Miss Camille John, who is a community dietitian from the Mariacoa Health District within the Ministry of Health, Wellness and the Environment in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. She completed a Bachelor's of Science degree in Nutrition and Dietetics with the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, and she's currently pursuing a graduate degree in Public Health. So Camille, take it away.
Okay, great. So hello, good afternoon from sunny St. Vincent. So I'm here today to talk to you about nutrition, and it's one of the important aspects in terms of managing your diabetes. And a lot of persons are very concerned about what they can eat and what they can't. So Lena, could you go to the first slide, please?
Sure.
Okay, so good nutrition is important, as you know. It becomes critical for persons diagnosed with chronic diseases such as diabetes, hypertension, and renal failure, and obesity. Next slide. What can diabetic eat and how much? Persons living with diabetes can eat almost anything, preferably complex carbohydrates versus simple sugar, along with high fiber food. So as you know, sometimes I have patients and they will come and they're like, oh, I don't know why as we use, sugar is so high. I'm not eating anything sweet. But as you know, carbs turns into sugar, simple sugar, when eaten and broken down into the body. Okay, next slide, please. Right, these take longer to digest. So that's the fiber, right? Takes longer to digest. And sorry, the foods I just mentioned, the complex carbohydrates, these take longer to digest and are packed with fibers, vitamins, and minerals. Example, whole grain breads, your oatmeal, your vegetables, your legume, your brown rice, and your wheat. So versus the white bread, we ask diabetics to have the wheat. I mean, some persons say they're allergic to the wheat. They find it dry, but because of the fiber, it takes longer to break down into the bloodstream. So therefore, it takes longer to break down into the bloodstream. So therefore, it wouldn't spike your sugar level as much as when eating a white bread, a piece of white bread, because it takes little time for it to break down. Hence why we ask you to have more whole grain stuff. And also fiber is good for your colon as well. Right. Okay. The next slide, please. So simple carbohydrates, these are broken down and digest very quickly, as I mentioned. Next slide, please. Okay, what is important and how much and when? So I have patients, as Dr. Brown mentioned before, that some patients complain that they're not hungry, right? Diabetics patient. But the thing is, you may skip a meal, and then later on in the day, you tend to make up, so you overeat, and therefore you have a spike in your glucose level. So we as dietitian, we ask that you eat small meals but often. So maybe around 6, 7 you have your breakfast, and in between you have your healthy snacks. So around 10:30 you have a healthy snack such as maybe a smoothie or some unsalted nuts or unsalted or sweetened nuts, unsalted or sweetened popcorn. Around 12, between 12 and 1, you have your lunch. Then again, about 3:30, just for example, you have another snack, and about 6, 7, you have a dinner, and your dinner should be much lighter, right? And for those on insulin, sometimes we add an extra snack for you. So the latest you might eat is about 9, okay? Next slide, please. Okay, so looking at this plate, how many of you plates look something like this when you're eating your lunch? Yeah, so as you can see, a half of the plate, you have your vegetables, and then a quarter, you have a bit of starch, and then a quarter protein. So, and there's a lot of color going on. So Keon mentioned about him eating, and I wanted to correct him eating more dark greeny. Now, his diet may not work for you if you're a diabetic. One, you might have you might have something like renal failure, and we don't encourage that you eat dark greeny veg. Okay, and as a diabetic as well, when you're looking at your vegetables, you need to limit your most starchy vegetables, such as your beet, your corn, your pumpkin, and your carrots. Those are sweet. Okay, so you limit those. You can have them, but you won't eat them as much as I will maybe your cabbage or your pachoy, your broccoli. Yeah. Next slide, please. Okay, how much is enough? So every individual diet will tailor to them. So if I made a diet for patient A, I will not use the same diet for patient A for patient B, because your diet depends on your age, your gender, your size, your physical state, your activity level, and your glycemic level. Next slide, please. Okay, how much and when? And as I mentioned, I gave you some samples already how your meals should be broken down. So we advise that you should eat every 3 to 4 hours. So food must be eaten in controlled portions and at the appropriate time. And you saw the plate, they have a quarter. So if you have a plate, half of it must be vegetables. And I name out to you the most starchy vegetables that you must limit. And the other half, you could have quarter starch, your quarter protein. But how you prepare your food is very important as well. So here in the Caribbean, we like to stew and fry everything because it's very convenient, it's faster. But we ask that you use more baking, steaming, and grilling as well. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, how much is a serving? And that's another problem that we have. We in the Caribbean, we eat with our eyes. So if we love a lot of ground provision, we're gonna fill up our plate with a lot of ground provision and a lot of a lot of protein, right? Because we love it. And then sometimes as well, the problem that we're having instead of is now, you probably just have your vegetables only on Sunday. We have problems with availability as well. We have problem with cost. So you won't find a lot of persons eating a lot of vegetables. For example, clients in the Grenadines will tell you it's too expensive for them to purchase vegetables. Or sometimes if the vegetables do come because of the terrain in the Grenadines, they really can't grow vegetables. So they have a problem with vegetables, right? So how much is a serving? So we're gonna look at your staples such as your rice, your pasta, your macaroni pie, your ground provision, and your breadfruit. Okay, next slide, please. So your rice and pasta, 1 serving is equal to half a cup, right? Your macaroni pie, not because you're diabetic doesn't mean you can't indulge in your macaroni pie, but how much is, the portion is the problem. So 1 serving is 3 inches by 3 pieces, 3 by 3, pieces, right? Piece. Your ground provision, 1 service is 1 slice. For example, I would tell my clients, especially when it's breadfruit season, do not eat the whole breadfruit. And if they're eating 1 slice and they'll be cheeky, they'll be like, what is 1 slice? When normally in the Caribbean, we cut the breadfruit in four, so quarters. So they'll say, is it a quarter slice? And I'll be, no, 1 slice. And I'm like, we can eat a 1 slice of breadfruit. So, 1 slice of provision, one serving is 1 slice, right? And with the breadfruit now, as you can see, you're allowed two slices per portion. And sometimes I say, if you're not going to add, I would tell my patient, if you're not going to add any other ground provision, you could have 4 slices of the breadfruit if you know you're just going to have breadfruit alone. All right, so that would be 2 portions. Next slide. Okay, so your bread, your cornflakes, and your biscuit. So we're going to show you the serving size. So one bread, for example, if it's a round, because we have different here, we have the penny loaf, we have the sliced bread, we have different types of bread. So if it's a slice, it's one serving is a slice. If it's a round like a bun, is one of those. Cornflakes is 3/4 cup, and we ask you to look at your labels. So it's very important as a diabetic to see how much sodium and how much sugar that the stuff that you're going to put into your body, how much per serving the sugar is or the sodium is, right? So with cornflakes now, yes, you're going to see like a low sodium, low sugar cereal, and it's 3/4 of a cup. And if it's a biscuit, and we ask that diabetic do keep a biscuit or chocolate, because sometimes you go into the hypo mode, and that's when the sugar level drop below 80 mg per deciliter. So we ask that you have a sweet biscuit. Now, the biscuit that they're talking about here is the Cricks, which is very popular, right? So we ask you that you have 6 to 8 cricks if you're having that, plus a piece of protein with your vegetables. Okay, next slide, please. So your legumes, because your legumes does contain a bit of starch, so a third cup of legumes. And if you're eating peanut, if you're anything like my mother who was diabetic, she would eat a whole bottle of nuts, right? But everything do have servings, so 16 peanuts, and that will be, say most of the nuts have like two nuts in a shell, so that would be 8 of those. So 2 times 8 is 16. And then if it's your bread nut is very starchy, it's 2 to 3 seeds. Now I know a lot of people will say 2 to 3 seeds, but you could double that, so you could have 6 seeds because you could have 2 portions. Okay, next slide, please. And then your fruits. Now remember, we're talking fruits, and then sometimes you hear fruits and you think, oh, fruits are healthy, I could eat as much. Be careful. The more mature the fruit is, it contains more sugar. So we ask our patient here in the Caribbean to eat the fruits like a banana, if it's a medium sliced banana, or if it's a mango, it's a face of mango, but we ask them to eat it half ripe, because fruits contain its own sugar called fructose. So you have to be careful. Just like milk contains its own sugar called lactose. So you really want to be careful. Right? So 1 small banana or a sugar apple, and as I said, you eat them half, right? 10 small plums, right? Or a half cup of cubed papaya. Okay, next slide, please. And then you canned fruits. Now, okay, because we have a culture, we have a barrel culture, which you know, especially around Christmas time, right? So you probably most Vincentians, your family probably pack, like, you know, the peach vegetable, the canned fruit, sorry. So we ask them to drain the syrup, because you know the syrup is there to help keep it fresh. So we ask them to drain and rinse them. So they're allowed 2 halves of peach or pear of apricot. And if it's a fruit cocktail, it's a quarter cup of fruit cocktail after they finish draining the syrup and washing it off, running it under the tap. And then if it's a pineapple, it's 1 ring of pineapple. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have pictures here. So you could actually measure with your hands. So if you notice, if the vegetable half cup should fit, and yes, I know we all have different size palms, but a half cup should fit in the middle, just like that, as you're seeing, as it's depicted on the picture. And a cup of vegetables will be 2 palms. Yeah, so if you don't have measuring utensils, you could use your hand. Okay, back to the milk. I was saying, right. So as I mentioned to you, milk have its own sugar, and here in St. Vincent, we tend to buy the powder milk, which is the full cream milk. But we advise the diabetics to have either skimmed milk or half fat milk, right? So if you're having milk, 1 serving is equal to a half cup, right? And it's just like juice as well. 1 serving is equal to a half cup, or we say 8 ounces. Okay.
That lady, she's a doctor sent me some. Then you see more keto. I don't keto. Pizza.
Somebody need to mute their mic. So your fruit from animals. How much is enough? Okay, so 1 drumstick is a serving, and if it's your meat, it's 1 ounce. And if it's a fish, so if it's a sliced fish, it's 1 small piece. And if it's sardine, it's 2 small sardines and not the whole tin. And for sardines, we ask that you have the sardines in the water versus the brine, the oil, okay? And just for the tuna as well, so it's 1/4 cup of tuna. And if it's eggs, we advise that you have, yes, 1 medium egg, but no more than 3 eggs in a week, okay? Because as you know, sometimes as diabetic, you have high cholesterol as well, and the yellow part of the egg is full of high cholesterol. Next slide, please. And then the fat. So Kian was mentioning, you do have to be careful with fat, but we all need fat. Fat gives us energy. Just like the carbs as well. He was saying about the carbs, yeah, but you do need a bit of carb. Carbs give you energy as well. And you need both carbs and fat. So sometimes you need to be careful about the diets, especially when you look on the internet and you do your own research. You have to be careful with these fat diets, okay? Go and see a specialized nutritionist or dietitian, right? So 1 teaspoon of butter, margarine, or cooking oil, 1 teaspoon of peanut butter, 1 tablespoon of salad dressing, and 1 slice of avocado, which you know as well is a healthy fat, but still everything in moderation, okay? Next slide, please. right? So when you look at this, I don't know why why the males are always allowed to have more than us. I don't know. Right? And sometimes we women are more hardworking. So as you can see, and as the previous slide did mention, according to your gender, it will manipulate how much you eat. So you notice the females, they have 2 to 3 servings of staples at any, that's at any given meal, right? And then you look at the legumes and the food from animals. So look at your yellow veg. So the females are allowed 2. Okay, the male are allowed 2 as well. And we have something called free food. So like your lettuce and so on, those are free food. You could eat as much as you want, unless you have like a renal problem. Your next slide, please. So I had mentioned previously about the healthy cooking methods. So we asked that you have baking, grilling, boiling, and steaming versus the frying and the stewing. Next slide. Okay, so you're going to eliminate, as I mentioned, the stewing and the barbecue and the frying. So let's look at condiments. The condiments like your mustard, your tomato ketchup, and your barbecue sauce, they are filled with a lot of sodium and sugar. So be careful when you're using condiments. The barbecue sauce, you could substitute for the tomato paste if you like. Okay? So tips, eat small meals more frequently, as I had mentioned before, I said 3 to 4 hours, okay? But they say 3 to 3.5 hours, okay? For 5 to 6 times per day. And I mentioned it already, read your food labels and beware of the sugar content and the sodium contents as well. Eliminate or reduce the simple sugar and the processed carbohydrates. Next slide. Say sweet and sugary. Could you mute your mic, please? Say sweet and sugary drinks for special occasion or during periods of hypoglycemia, which I mentioned. So diabetics, please walk around with a bit of a candy or something in your bag, especially if you know you're going for a fasting test. You could walk with your breakfast before, prepare breakfast and walk with it. And then after doing the test, you sit and you have your breakfast, okay? Limit consumption of ketchup, barbecue sauce, and alcohol, because alcohol actually it lowers your glucose level, but not in a good way, okay? So be very careful. Consume 8 to 9 ounces, 8 ounces glasses of water, and that depends on one, maybe your doctor might put you restrict your fluid intake, and 2, you might be more active, so somebody might be doing hard labor versus a typist in the office, right? And exercise at least 5 times a week for the minimum of 30 minutes. Next slide, please. Okay, that's the end. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so very much, Camille. And we won't have any questions here. We'll have Dr. Janila Adolphus, Dr. Adolphus's presentation. And then at the end, if we have time left over, then we'll have questions for both. So Dr.